Hey y'all, Tiz here reading from Mutual Aid, Building Solidarity During This Crisis and the Next by Dean Spade. And I am on Chapter 3, Part 1, We Get More When We Demand More. Disasters are ruptures. Existing systems break down and then are either repaired, replaced, or scrapped. Disasters exacerbate and expose inequalities, showing the pre-existing crises that elites strive to ignore and hide from view. When disasters emerge, governments and corporations quickly move to downplay them, hoping to get back to the status quo of extraction and profit-making as soon as possible, to take credit for having resolved them, and to silence demands for relief. Governments and the 1% also use disasters as opportunities to push their favored reforms. COVID-19, for example, has generated right-wing wins like closing the border, suspending environmental regulations, giving the FBI, DEA, and local police hundreds of millions of dollars, and expanding the capacity of police to harass and criminalize the poor for allegedly violating public health regulations. At the same time, disasters are opportunities for exposing injustice and pushing forward left-wing demands. COVID-19 has been an opportunity for mobilizing people to resist injustice. As more people are laid off or forced to work dangerous jobs, we are increasingly standing together against landlords, bosses, police, prisons, and a profit-driven healthcare system. In seeking to curb the worst effects of the pandemic, some forms of government relief have emerged that give us hope for another way of life. Eviction moratoriums, increased unemployment benefits and income support, free public transit, suspension of student loan payments, and more. While this relief has been far from universal or adequate, it has demonstrated that many of the things our movements have fought for are entirely possible. Disasters are pivotal times in the competition between political programs, moments when much can be lost or won. Winning the world we want is far from guaranteed. Our opponents, those who currently control the most of the land, work, food, housing, transportation, weapons, water, energy, and media, are fervently working to maintain the status quo of maldistribution and targeted violence, and worsen it to increase profits and power for themselves. Our capacity to win is possible to the extent that we can collectively realize that they do not control us, and collectively disobey and disrupt their systems, retaking control of our ways of sustaining life. If we want as many people as possible to survive and to win in the short and long term, we have to use moments of disaster to help and mobilize people. Mutual aid is the way to do that. During the COVID-19 pandemic, mutual aid groups have proliferated, and more people are learning how to organize mutual aid than have in decades. This is a big chance for us to make a lot of change. We need mutual aid groups and networks capable of bringing millions of new people into work that deepens their understanding of the root causes of the crises and inequalities that they're fired up about, and that builds their capacity for bold collective action. We need groups and networks that do not disappear after the peak of the crisis, but instead become part of an ongoing, sustained mobilization with the capacity to support people and to keep building pressure for bigger wins. As mobilization builds, governments, corporations, and corporate media will approach mutual aid in three ways, all of which, as I write this, are already visible in regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. These three responses often happen simultaneously amongst different agencies, elected officials, and levels of government. Some will ignore proliferating mutual aid efforts. Some will try to fold them into a narrative about volunteerism, labeling mutual aid efforts heroic and portraying them as complementary to government efforts and existing systems rather than as oppositional to those systems. And some police and spy agencies will surveil and criminalize mutual aid efforts. This was visible in the response to Hurricane Sandy in 2012. Occupy Sandy, a volunteer-based mutual aid network that emerged from Occupy Wall Street, organized over 60,000 volunteers to provide water, food, medicine, and other necessities to people left without power and in dire conditions by a government utterly unprepared to help them. The Department of Homeland Security extended its spying from Occupy Wall Street to Occupy Sandy at the same time that some New York City government agencies helped Occupy Sandy get supplies to redistribute. Governor Andrew Cuomo and New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg mostly ignored Occupy Sandy's frontline work as they focused on managing their own reputations. The fundamental goal of all three of these responses is to ensure the legitimacy and stability of the current systems and delegitimize alternative ways of meeting human needs. At best, mutual aid projects get framed as non-threatening, temporary adjuncts to existing systems. Elected officials and government agencies sometimes even seek legitimacy by associating with mutual aid projects if those projects are more successful at meeting needs in the government. At worst, mutual aid projects are portrayed as unlawful, dangerous, and criminal. As we saw with the police attacks on the Black Panther Party breakfast programs, or more recent Trump administration raids on the medical camps of No More Deaths and organizations whose offer support to migrants at the southern U.S. border, when mutual aid efforts truly build and legitimize coordinated action and autonomy against existing systems, governments typically crack down on them. Next is part 2 of this chapter.